Look, I think that the what the president has done with respect to communications has been to consistently explain to the American people where we are and where we need to go, and that continues to be the way that he approaches this issue, and very much from the perspective of what it feels like to sit around a dining room table or a kitchen table in this country, because that's his lived experience, and that's the way that he approaches these economic policy questions.
Hello, folks. Yes, Left Reckoning. I'm Matt Leck. With me, as always, David Griscom. Hello, David.
Hey, man. How you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm glad that our president knows where we are and where we're going. That's always a good thing for our politicians to know, is where we are, and to get their lived experience down. We have a fun show for you tonight. Well, fun is an interesting term, I guess, to be thrown around when we're discussing certain topics. Talking about Dollar General workers not putting up with abuse at the hands of their corporation and maybe massing to fight back. And we'll also be getting into, let's maybe take the music down for this part, getting into the Uvalde shooting.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know. How do you think we should start this off, David? I mean, this is the first show we've devoted to this topic on Left Reckoning.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's no way to start it other than just, putting your heart out there for those families. I mean, it's really, really difficult to think about the terror that those children went through and the community and what their parents have been through. But, we have to talk about it. And because, these things, every time it's the last one, right? And it comes back time and time again. And I think it's important to, show solidarity with all those affected, and also to be able to talk through some of the villains who create the conditions that allow these things to happen.
Yeah, and it's tough because there's really two discussions that have become acute on this issue. One is, why this keeps happening. The other is the response to this. And as to the first one, we have another shooting in the wake we're in the wake of right now that the details are still coming in on in Tulsa at a Warren medical facility, I believe. And, who knows what happened there, but the killer's apparently down. The tough thing is in the best of times, any sort of information about a tragedy is provisional, but finding out that when you have to rely on police departments that are used to getting away with lies, I think that's the other really urgent thing. That is, it's equally as big of a problem right now. Is these spectacle mass shootings are a big problem. Everyday violence and intimidation of guns is another problem that shouldn't get swept up under that. But also this failure of institutions that we're dealing with, and it's like we're just developing now, I think, a vocabulary to talk about that in a mainstream kind of way. And, mainstream, as people point out, is a relic of the Cold War. That's not really a standard thing for media environment. But, unless you have anything got to say, I want you to get to this NPR article.
Yeah. I mean, I just think, we should go to the police first. We're going to talk about the police. We're going to talk about the politicians, and we're going to talk about, gun control as in general as a topic. But, I think like really starting to highlight what we're getting out of Uvalde with the police department there, how they acted, to parents, to people in this moment. And, we're frankly cowards and allowed something like so monstrous like this to happen. But let's start with this NPR bit, and we can go from there.
And what's interesting about this is I have a lot of criticisms of NPR and the credulity, frankly, that they give to institutions like police departments, and that's a little bit extreme. But I want to do this one, and we'll just listen to this because this is, and then Business Insider also had an article about, and we'll maybe go through that a little bit about how many times the stories are changing about certain things, like what's interesting about this is NPR is not like one of these places where they just take as a matter of fact that, like, say JFK was assassinated by like secret deep state folks, right? Like this is like even or any sort of thing, or even like MLK, there was something fishy to look into there. Like, this is any sort of like conspiratorial type of brain patterns isn't something that NPR wants to put out there. But we're dealing with something where cops are lying. They're in a conspiracy to cover their ass right now. And how do we deal with that? And like, I just feel like this was also one of the lessons from George Floyd summer, was how much cops would just lie about certain things, about aggressiveness of crowds, stuff like that. But anyway, here's how NPR responds to this story about cops. That this was a big point of emphasis. This teacher propped open the door, and that teacher's going to have to live with that for the rest of their lives. And come to find out that was wrong.
The story of what happened in Uvalde, Texas, leading up to and during a mass shooting that killed 19 children and 2 adults, well, it's a story that keeps on changing. In the last couple days, there have been new developments, and prior law enforcement statements are being walked back. NPR's Laura Benshoff is in Uvalde and brings us the latest. Hi, Laura.
Hi, Elsa.
So I want to talk first about how this gunman got into the school. Like, the original story was that a teacher had left a back door open, right? What do we know now about that?
Right. At a press conference last Friday, the Texas Department of Public Safety had said the gunman entered Robb Elementary through a door, that this teacher had left something in to keep it from locking behind her. Now they're saying that's not true. DPS confirmed to NPR that video footage showed the teacher running back inside and closing the door. She's hired an attorney named Don Flannery to speak on her behalf, and here's how he relays her version of what.
So that's why the announcement was made. It wasn't because, we got that wrong and we want to get the story right. It's because a lawyer got involved. Because this teacher who was cowering, could hear the shots being fired, had relatives that were going to school at that school. The teacher, despite grieving from that traumatic experience, had to protect their reputation from the police, who looked to her as a way to blame, just to put blame on her. I mean, it's really menacing, is what it is. Like, this is menacing stuff from the cops.
And I mean, let's talk. We'll come back to some of the details and some of the things that happen to parents in a second. But I think that point is 100% important to make. It's like, think about what the police were trying to do to this person after experiencing one of the most horrific things you could ever imagine. They were trying to not just throw her under the bus, make it seem like she was culpable for their mistakes and for their failures. And what it shows, and this is something that is not unique to Texas, but it is very, very prevalent here, is a complete lack of accountability for the people who we give guns to and are supposedly supposed to be responsible for public safety. So, the Uvalde Police Department now is refusing to cooperate with DPS here in Texas. And at first, DPS was coming out in support of the police and ran a lot of interference in their favor. And before we even get to the most recent developments here, it has to be noted for people that if you saw some of the kind of national interviews with DPS agents that were on, big networks like CNN, MSNBC, etc., and you thought, wow, these guys are, bumbling buffoons. Well, one, you're not wrong. And two, it's because these people are not used to ever being held accountable. Because of Greg Abbott, because of the Republicans here, they have funneled billions of dollars into the hands of the DPS here to run a parallel border operation to the Border Patrol, which has been an absolute disaster. We've talked about that on this program many times. It has been an absolute disaster that's cost human lives. And has been, this is the least of the problems, but a huge waste of taxpayer money, right? These are just people who are not ever questioned, never feel like they're going to have any pushback from the political system or from the public. And you can see that in their kind of public facing statements.
Sorry. Yeah, there's this another on MSNBC here. Again, like, these mainstream sources are having to confront, stare into the abyss with this police department here. No Lie with Brian Cohen on Twitter. A CNN reporter just confronted the Uvalde School District Police Chief to ask why they are refusing to cooperate with the investigation into their response. And I don't believe there's video of this, right? But
we do have video of that.
Of this specific thing. Oh, wow. Okay, yeah, that is what this video is. But yeah, the police chief said they will only explain themselves to the parents once the families quit grieving. Yeah, that's what this video is here then.
which is, I believe so.
Okay, yeah. Here is.
I mean, I know that the school district has thrown media off of their property, saying that they will be arrested for trespassing. And I believe this is the police chief here, but I could be incorrect.
So I want to talk to you about your decision and what the DPS director said.
How's it going?
Good, I'm Pete. Nice to meet
Matt
you.
Freeman, nice to
I
meet
want
you.
to talk to you about the decision and what.
Department we're doing, but just to let y'all know, and I just spoke with.
I know you did. But
You're not blocking me, are you?
No.
No.
Turn this way.
No, just so you all know. Just so you all know, obviously, we're not going to release anything. We have people in our community being buried, so we're going to be respectful.
I just want your reaction
We're going to be.
the director
we're gonna-
McGraw
we're gonna-
saying that you were responsible for the decision
Right.
to
We're
go
gonna
into
be.
that room. How do you
We're
explain
going to be.
yourself to
We're
the
going to be
parents?
respectful to the family.
I understand that, but you have an
we're going-
opportunity
Oh, and sure, and we're
to explain
going to.
yourself to the parents.
And just so you know, we're gonna do that eventually, obviously.
When?
And whenever this is done, we'll let the families quit grieving. Then we'll do that, obviously. And just so
But you
just so everybody,
understand how
and
the
just so everybody,
families- how the
just so
family
everybody
feels.
knows, we've been in contact with DPS every day. Just so you all know.
They say you're not-
To tell them that they don't
you're
want to
not
be
I've
cooperating.
been
investigated.
on the phone with them every day.
But
Just so
they
you all
say
know.
you're not cooperating. So just 2 seconds.
Just so you know, we've been talking to them
But
every day.
what
I
is your
appreciate you.
what is your
just lying over dead kids.
And I don't want to, I mean, we're going to talk about politics in a minute, but I want to keep on the police for a second. It's been interesting to see because, I mean, you can see the fear in his eyes. He doesn't want to be held accountable. And they're trying to delay this because they're hoping that something big will happen somewhere else and attention will be drawn away from them. There's been a lot of, really great reporting that specifically talking to people in the community. And, that's a town where there is a good segment of the population that's very supportive of law enforcement generally. But from what I've been reading, while some of those people are sort of, some people are maintaining that support, but I think even amongst people who are fervent supporters, there's a lot of questions that are being asked, especially since this is a smaller town. People are very likely to be directly affected by this, and the stories that we get is just like beyond cowardice. It just goes into straight up malice and a kind of self-centeredness, personal self-preservation over the community that you've sworn to protect. And you can see that they're trying to do a lot of kind of cleanup right now, and that's what this all is about. Not just on the national scale is what I'm trying to say. Like there's a community aspect to this too, where they want the big reporters to leave so that they can sort of deal with people that they know and might be able to either intimidate or silence versus having the national spotlight on them right now. Right. If they can delay 3-4 weeks and, the trucks leave and the national media leaves, they're going to have a much better time explaining this shit to the public versus having, pesky reporters in there questioning their facts.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. This is really a running out the clock situation because like and it's almost a shock that this hasn't happened before with one of these high profile killings.
Yeah.
Like that immediate exposure, like I mean, I guess they haven't really fucked up this bad. I mean, I'll just play a little bit from this Business Insider piece it's just 5 days ago. So this is probably old, but it's like a certain number of times the cops have changed their story. Texas police changed details of Uvalde 13 times. But here's just one part of it. Police arrived at the scene quickly but backed off for more than an hour. At the press conference a day after the shooting, McCraw said, bottom line, law enforcement was there. They did engage immediately. They did contain him in a classroom. They put a tactical stack together in a very orderly way and breached the assault and assaulted the individual. Lieutenant Chris Olivares on May 25th in an interview with NBC's Today Show emphasized the speed of the police reaction. He said that police responded within a moment's notice. He also said that officers without hesitation, I don't know, like this is just like, are we being fucking poetic right now? What do words mean when you say something like without hesitation tried to make entry into that school but were stopped by the gunman firing at them? Well, what else would cause hesitation but the gunman firing at you? But by May 26th, police said that the gunman had not been killed by had not been killed by a U.S. Border Patrol agent until 12:40, raising questions of what happened in the roughly hour between the shooting beginning and the gunman being shot to death. According to new information from McCraw on May 27th, 3 local police officers got to the school at 11:40, just 2 minutes after the gunman initially entered the building and opened fire. 2 of the cops were grazed by bullets as they entered the school, he added. I mean, who knows if that's true, right? In the latest description, McCraw said police exchanged gunfires with the subject until 11:45, but by 11:51, a police sergeant and federal agent arrived. And anyway, there's again like they're making shit up.
Yeah, and like if you have the video of them dealing with the parents, that'd be helpful. But just to go through it real quick for folks, I'm sure. I mean, this event has really shook so many people. I feel like it feels very different. But what happened here is the shooter killed their grandmother. They drove off to school armed with 2 AR-15s, crashed their car. They exchanged gunfire with the police officer, allegedly, went into the school. So, and a teacher saw this person crash their vehicle and run into the school with weapons, right, and called the police. And then basically they let this person in, let them barricade themselves in a room with students and teachers. Contained. And then when parents started to get calls and showed up, this is what happened.
And so this is just to warn folks, like I haven't watched much of this video myself. Like this is maybe the worst thing I've ever seen, but this is parents being contained themselves as their kids are contained with a guy with 2 AR-15s that's killing them.
Yeah.
Why are you out here worried about us?
It's so horrific. And and from what we know now, off-duty Border Patrol agent came in and supposedly shot the shooter. But we're waiting for more information because they are basically trying to prevent the facts from getting out to the public. And as we've said here, they've lied constantly. They've been caught in a bunch of lies. So I'm not even, fully confident in reporting, the full facts of the case right now because, we just don't have all this information because they're playing this game.
And there's a lot of insinuation being made, particularly by like right-wing leaning propagandists like Posobiec and Tim Pool, that there might be something nefarious. Like what they're covering up isn't like some secret woke agenda or like CRT shadow group. It's that they might have shot kids in addition to like not actually stopping the gunman for that long a time. I think that's probably the main candidate because there was a statement that we believe at this time that the children were all killed by the gunman. And it's like, well, that raises a red flag to me. Like, well, let's see if this is one of those things that later gets revised when the national media has left town.
And those people were just such pigs. I'm just going to say that right now. People coming out here and acting like there's some kind. I mean, this is like Alex Jones level stuff. And it just it's just beyond unacceptable. And I know I don't have to say that, but it just infuriates me so much. And I mean, before because we could talk about the cops for a while. I don't know if we have any more clips or anything we want to hit on, but I do want to just note a couple things before we move over to the Texas GOP, because Lord in heaven, we got a lot to say about those folks. That this is a town, like many towns in America. And we talk about, policing in this country a lot in this program. We've also talked to it. We did an episode with our friends at This Is Revolution on this. And, when we're talking about policing, in this country, a lot of conversations have been about the police budget. And, it's worth noting that this is a town where a significant amount of their money is going to this police force. And something like 40%. I could be around there in the ballpark, but this is what happens. This is what happens when you disinvest from society, right? And the only thing that they have is a police budget to sort of funnel money into. And I don't think this needs to be said too much, but they don't show up for you. They don't protect you. They are there to enforce the will of capitalists, to protect property and protect the wealthy. They don't care if there's a shooting in a poor neighborhood. And they sure as hell, it seems, don't care if there's an active shooter shooting up children right in front of them. I mean, it's a horrific investment. And you just cannot separate these things from talking about the way that we run cities and communities in this country.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I do think there is the sort of like good meaning concern about, say, a slogan like defund the police. Well, it's like, what happens in a situation like this? And it's like, you need to delineate between what we do with policing and the concepts of security. And like me personally, the way I understand like something like police abolition would probably still entail for the foreseeable future something like state armed first response and security for things, just because of how much just the practicalities of guns in this country and that sort of thing. So, like I think that's an important thing to say. Like when we talk about like this is what cops do. They're not actually. There's a great demonstration. Honestly, they aren't heroes. They're not going to like 24 save the day. They're going to cover their ass and they're going to harass people for petty shit that we don't need to have them harassed for. And that's the thing is like, and like I say all that things about the armed first response, knowing that we have a lot of stuff to reform about like SWAT and stuff like that as well. But it's like, police itself, like this is a really good demonstration of how untrustworthy they are as presently constituted.
And again, as we find out more information, I think it's going to be even more damning. The fact that they're no longer cooperating, certainly with media, but even with state agencies that are supposed to oversee them. Remember, if you're just joining us, that the police department is now no longer cooperating with the Texas Department of Public Safety. And while the Texas Department of Public Safety early on was coming out in support of these guys, it should be noted that, just a couple of days ago, Director Colonel Steve McCraw said it was the wrong decision to wait.
That's why they said we're not going to cooperate with you anymore, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But what that means to me is that as more information is coming even to the DPS, who was willing up front to play along with the police as they were attacking this teacher, even the DPS is starting to back off. And again, as I said it a little while ago, the DPS is not some kind of angelic organization themselves. So it just shows that this shit is so rotten, and it's rotten all the way, to the core here. And, like, what have we got from the Texas GOP is this really, really nasty kind of language. They have been using this phrase, which I don't want to fixate on it too much, but it upsets me very much, where they're saying we need to secure targets. We need to secure our targets. And what they mean by that is schools, right? Just absolutely kind of despicable military phrasing for a place where we're supposed to be educating children and the next generation of this society. But that's the kind of language that's floating around right now from our elected officials.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, it's like, it's just how cynical they move to like different things that would sell at like security conferences, security contractors. Like, oh, this is going to be a boon for fucking security guards.
Well, talking about, the doors being unlocked and we should only have one entrance into schools, which is absolutely, that's not the problem. I'm sorry, friends. That's not the fucking problem. Should we go over and talk about the politics though a little bit?
Yeah. So, I mean, just to sort of start it off, there was this John Cornyn tweet that quoted Rep. Tony Gonzalez, who's been, a fixture during all this. But Cornyn says, the second guessing and finger pointing among state and local law enforcement is destructive, distracting, and unfair. Complex scenarios require split-second decisions, easy to criticize with 2020 hindsight. I mean, just to use the language there again. Like, as an English major, like I love that. Like split-second decisions, as Cody Johnson, I believe, replies, 2,400 split seconds, and then somebody else says 4,800. It was 80 minutes. Yeah. Like, it's just like you don't need to tell. It's just a weird way of a weird license that cops and cop defenders have with language that drives me insane.
Yeah, well, it's always depersonalized. And the fact is, it doesn't matter how much money you pump into these departments and how much training you give them when their everyday training and their everyday experience is to treat the public with suspicion and contempt. And that's what you saw with the parents, and to protect themselves above all else. I mean, that's all the excuses for why they were able to kill unarmed Black people, is that they were scared, right? And I think at a certain point you need to believe them. that this is a scared group of people running around with weapons in your communities, and it does not make us safer.
Yeah, and just to go over to that passive language point, point, was contained when the kid barricaded himself in a classroom with kids. Like, think about was contained. Just that implies that the cops did that, right? Like, if he contained him, and just lying about a dozen and a half dead kids. It's unbelievable.
So let's talk a little bit about Abbott and Co. There's a hell of a lot to start with, but let's just start with this, because this is what they're going to try to do, right? This is Greg Abbott here saying that he's requesting Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick and Speaker Dade Phelan to each convene a special legislative committee, not session, committee, following last week's tragedy in Uvalde. As Texans mourn, we must reassess the twin issues of school safety and mass violence. And here are the things that he wants to be in that committee: school safety, mental health, social media, police training, and firearm safety. Again, this is one of those things. This is a committee that will be set up to sweep this under the rug. There needs to be a special session put in place to actually pass legislation on this, not just to get everyone in a room together to take some pictures and to make it seem like you're acting fast on this. Let's also not paint too rosy of picture either, but we have to point out the fact that what they want to do right now is symbolic bullshit, right? And two, the fact is that even if we do get an actual special session to do something about this, nothing will be done. Remember that after El Paso, right, the horrific shooting where a hate-filled bigot drove across the state from Dallas to El Paso, one of the most beautiful and wonderful cities in this country, to just shoot up people. The response from the Texas GOP was to make it easier for people to get a handgun without a permit, constitutional carry, which, by the way, this is why remembering your history is really damn important, because these guys love to paint a false history of Texas and our history. Some of the first legislation that was passed when Texas became an independent country was to restrict guns in public and restrict knives in public, right? So when they say, oh, we're returning to our roots, right? That's bullshit. They are charting a new, extremely dangerous path for all of us right now. That's the kind of response that we get from the GOP.
Yeah, it's like what Eric Hobsbawm inventing tradition right before our eyes about killing devices, basically. Because the OK Corral, like that whole, if people know their history with that, I keep forgetting the fucking gunslinger that they hired, but it was all at that point. It's all like, come to the hotel and turn in your firearms, otherwise you got to leave town. Because we have too much gunfighting going on, and it's frankly like scaring away businessmen from the town that we want to boost and expand. So yeah.
Well, let's play this Beto clip and talk about this. And people know how I feel about Beto. I'm not particularly enthralled. We're going to give him a little bit of props here, I think. But it should be noted that Beto got off of a plane where he's going to New York City for a fundraiser when this happened, which I don't know. It just sort of shows some of where his head's at. But I will say, people have seen this clip, and we're going to play it right now. But everything that I've read from reputable reporters here in Texas who have insights into the campaign say that this was at least unknown. Like, if it was planned, it was planned by Beto himself. The staff had no idea that it was going to go on. He was invited to this press conference by members of the community who had lost their children because they wanted him to be with them there. So that's just some important context here too, that he was invited to be there with other folks, and then this happened.
That's interesting context. I did not hear that.
Excuse me. Sit down. You're out of line and embarrassment. Hey, sit down and don't play this.
The next shooting is right now, and you are doing nothing. No, you need to get in.
Out of here. This isn't the place to talk this over.
This is totally predictable when you...
Sir, you're out of line. Sir, you are out of line. Sir, you are out of line. Please leave this auditorium. I can't believe you're a sick that would come to a deal like this to make a political issue. It's only like you. Why don't you get out of here?
All right.
I respect it. I got, because that entire entire thing's a charade. Those motherfuckers getting on that fucking stage, being all, oh goodness, we gotta come together right now, and it's important. Like, no, fuck you. Like, good for Beto for that. Like, I like what remains to be seen about follow through or whatever. And like you said about like our complaints about his political limitations, but I respect that.
No, I mean, here's the thing. Like, oh, this is a political stunt. 100% is a stunt. Yep. It's a stunt in a state where political stunts are the norm now. That is the game that they play. The fucking governor of this state set up a blockade on the southern border that cost the state billions of dollars in revenue, left food rotting in trucks because he wanted to go on Tucker Carlson's show and be the tough on the border governor, right? Come on, man. At this point, like, y'all have invited plenty of political stunts, and I will say, I think that I will give my tip of my cap to Beto on that, because I think a lot of times he's not my favorite guy, but I think that's right to show up at something like that and to speak for people who are being left off of that stage, for example.
Yep.
Let's talk about these people for a second. Let's talk about the Texas GOP, right? Because you hear that fella yelling, how dare you make this a political issue? How dare you make this a political issue? It's already a political issue. First of all, who's up on that stage, right? Second of all, what was the plan for that weekend for those boys? They were going to go fly down to Houston and go and speak at the National Rifle Association conference. And who was speaking at the National Rifle Association conference? Greg Abbott, Ted Cruz, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, Republican, Angela Paxton, Republican, Ken Paxton, Republican, right? Who's going to speak? That's a political issue. That's a political stage. And it's bullshit to act like they aren't political figures when it comes to guns, right? They're never political when it comes to guns. Everybody else is, right?
It's just so funny post Citizens United. And I mean, lobbying was a thing before then too, that this commodity, this has a lobbying arm that lobbies and pays for politicians to go do politics. The idea that it isn't political is, I mean, coming from the representatives that deal directly with that lobbying arm. I mean, this should be, an alien would be able to see right through this.
No, totally. And, let's, be fair to everybody. After praying, this is from the Texas Observer. After praying, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick decided that he was not going to go to the NRA meeting. Greg Abbott and Ken Paxton, they did not go in person, but they taped messages for the convention. And, of course, Trump was there. But there was another figure, and I don't know if you have this video handy.
Ted?
Yeah. Everyone's favorite, constantly melting boy, Ted Cruz, showed up and was quite happy to go. And we'll watch this clip for a second. And I just want people to watch this because at first Ted Cruz is going to say what Ted Cruz is typically going to say, right? Bullshit, evading, right? But just notice how much of a fucking politician this asshole is, that he can't even feign sympathy. And he starts going on this kind of stupid rah-rah, rally around the flag bullshit. Just watch this for a second.
There are 19 sets of parents who are never going to get to kiss their child goodnight again.
Is this the moment to reform gun laws?
It's easy to go to politics.
But it's important. It's at the heart of the issue.
I get that that's where the media likes to go.
No, it's not. It's where many of the people we've talked to here like to go.
The proposals from Democrats in the media inevitably, when some violent psychopath murders people,
A violent psychopath who's able to get a weapon so easily. 18-year-old with 2 AR-15s.
if you want to stop violent crime, the proposals the Democrats have, none of them would have stopped this.
But why does this only happen in your country? I really think that's what many people around the world they cannot fathom. Why only in America? Why is this American exceptionalism so awful?
You know, I'm sorry you think American exceptionalism is awful.
I think this aspect. I think this aspect.
Just what an
You got your political agenda.
No, it's
God,
honestly-
God love you.
I mean,
Senator, it's not. I just want to understand why.
I just think that really exposes just how slimy of a guy Ted Cruz is there, because he knows the second he says that he can hold that up, right? But
Yeah,
like, oh, look at this foreigner attacking America, and I'm going to stand up for the United States.
Exactly. He's got his Uncle Sam escape hatch, sort of like parachute pull, and it pulls him right out of there because all of his partisans are going to be like, yeah, that person said American exceptionalism in a bad way.
Mhm.
Fuck that. Fuck them. Let's go buy another gun.
And we'll talk about people who are watching me talk know how I feel about guns and gun control in general. I'm not a big fan on big bans or anything like that. We'll talk about that in a moment. The fact that Ted Cruz can't even entertain or speak about anything right there, I think is really telling and showing for the kind of soul that this person has, along with the fact that he's just constantly looking for his little hook. He's a fisherman, right? He's like looking for that little hook that he can stick in there, and the second he got that ammunition, he was ready to go. But I mean, before we talk about what we think, I'd like to paint a picture for folks as to what's on the table here in Texas. I want to talk about what Beto's positions on, and I want to talk about what the Texas Democratic Party has been saying. After the shooting, Beto came out and he says it's insane that we allow an 18-year-old to go in and buy an AR-15. What the hell did we think he was going to do with that? Then he said, right there, talking about Uvalde, if you want a solution, stop selling AR-15s in the state of Texas. Now, his campaign said, and this is from the Texas Tribune, his campaign says Beto believes that we should act immediately to prevent the next mass shooting by prioritizing common sense gun safety reforms that have a broad bipartisan support across the state. That includes popular policies such as repealing permitless carry, passing universal background checks, implementing red flag laws, enacting safe storage laws, and keeping weapons of war on the battlefield by preventing their sales in our community. And it's notable that people probably remember the famous Beto O'Rourke quote from when he was in his quixotic ride for president in 2020, that he says, "Hell yeah, we'll take your guns. We're going to take your AR-15s." That's where Abbott really wanted to hit him in this election. And I'd been saying that I think, of course, that ad's going to be playing 24/7 as the election season really starts to heat up. I don't think that's going to hit in the same way at this point. I mean, I think with a certain group of people who are sort of unmovable, I think that might attract them. But I think for people who might not 2-3 weeks ago, have sort of treated that as reasonable, might start in the near future. It's notable too that, like, as he has been running, because he said he wanted to do a buyback, a gun buyback. He has not run on that. He has not highlighted that. But when he has been asked on it, he has said that he says that his opinions on these things have not changed. So again, we'll see how he starts to develop his positions in the near future, but that's sort of where he is at. And, I think it's notable that, like, one, he's saying some of these things, two, he has been a little bit back and forth on the issue of buybacks, which I think is important regardless of which way you feel about that one way or the other. But let's talk about the state Democratic Party for a second, just because we opened up the segment on the Texas GOP by talking about Greg Abbott basically putting forward a bullshit session where they'll talk about, people are watching too much violence on social media. The Democratic Party here has said this is what they want to pursue, is raise the minimum age to purchase a firearm to 21 years old, require universal background checks for all firearms, implement red flag laws to allow temporary removal of firearms from those who are in imminent danger to themselves or others, require a cooling off period of the purchase of a firearm, and regulate civilian ownership of high capacity magazines.
Yeah, I mean, Do we want to get into some of our I'm dithering between going between where we think support the stuff versus what Canada's also doing, but I don't know what your instincts are.
Well, yeah, I mean, we can respond to this. I mean, I think maybe if we could play the clip from MR to get us to start on this, because this is not a small issue, and I don't think it's worthwhile to be a coward about it and not say what you think. I will say that at least for myself, I think I've been pretty consistent on my opinions on these things, and we're going to play a clip here of Michael and Matt from a little while ago, just to say that remember that like the way that we all worked on these things together, we were always talking back and forth with each other about our opinions on these things, and this was a position that I think we sort of came together, and I sort of still stand with, and I just wanted to play it just to show that like this is how we felt for a long time on this.
Yeah, this is from 2019 August.
Economics, but like the gun rights thing is like something that they're just allowed to talk about.
I think
you understand what I'm saying, or
not really? I mean, I think I'll give you just my 2-second snapshot on guns, and one is I liked what Jamie said yesterday, that if you have a conversation that because there's a big problem, right? Because a lot of gun control conversations don't take on the gun industry as an industry, as a capital I industry that is a danger to U.S. public health and global public health. Yeah. Actually, the global small arms industry is one of the greatest threats on the planet. And then you do get into this liberal stuff, which I do think is just frankly counterproductive. Look, when I see some, dumb schmuck walking into a Starbucks with like, paramilitary gear on, of course, make fun of him. He's an idiot. But the broader sort of like, guns, I do think that is liberal snobbery that is incredibly counterproductive and dumb. And I have no interest in playing that kind of cultural politics. I do have an interest in going after the NRA and the gun industry as a pernicious, dangerous, corrupted industry, right? And then the second thing I would say, the other two quick things, is that it's very difficult because if you really want to take care of guns, you got to do something extremely radical, which I'm not sure that's where I'd want to spend political capital, frankly. And number three,
yeah, exactly.
The way a lot of gun measures are implemented, and I'm not talking about really basics. Of course, you can do background check. There's all sorts of stuff you can do that's a no-brainer, and I'm not arguing against.
You can stop the manufacture of a lot of these things.
That's the issue, is the manufacture. But on the other hand, I don't want to take. I think a rhetoric of taking away, people's shotguns or whatever is ridiculous. And I also would say that that is not a myth. The origins of stop and frisk in New York City is a anti-gun program, which, by the way, had some efficacy. I mean, New York there's a lot of guns, but that is a completely racist and racialized policy. So people need to be extremely thoughtful about what they're actually advocating for and who's going to get policed as a result.
And I mean, I think Michael really says it perfectly there, and we'll expand on it obviously. But like, that last bit I think is really important, is to start thinking about who will be policed by what you're suggesting and what those consequences will be. I think this is just such a big difference, for example, between your mainstream liberal and a socialist perspective on these things, right? Like dropping even what the subject is, right, which is guns, where liberals are wanting to focus on the personal level, on the punitive level, versus on the level of the manufacturers and the corporations that profit from this, right? I think if you're serious about these things, then going at manufacturers, going after sellers, is a much more viable path. Than going after people. I'll say this time and time again. I know this is the case across the country, but I'll just speak from experience here in Texas. People own firearms, and notably, especially in rural parts of the country, people of color own firearms. And if you want to embolden a bunch of Bubba sheriffs to have another excuse to harass people, we see what people already face when they have legal gun ownership. In this country of police. If you want to give them an excuse to come after people, you're playing a very, very, very dangerous game. Now, there's plenty of stuff. I mean, frankly, I'm all for background checks. I think that that's very reasonable. I would prefer to see less high magazine capacity magazines being produced. I do think that some of those will be limited in if they're going to stop the spectacle of the horror. But I don't see like a very compelling reason to be against that necessarily. The AR-15 in particular, it's a gun I very much dislike. Everything from what it's used for to the aesthetics of it personally. I'm somebody who's not allergic to weapons particularly. I love, older shotguns and handguns and things like that. The AR-15 truly does represent a very psychotic break and a militarization of society. That being said, I don't know if you were to ban all in existence or do a buyback program, that being very beneficial or even feasible. Because remember, the AR-15 is used because it is the most popular gun in this country, which means it's one of the most accessible weapons in this country. And yeah, I mean, I'm fine with focusing on the manufacturer there. But there's a reason that it's the first one that's used, because the really scary reality is that if you were to successfully ban one of those, there are plenty of other weapons out there that are much more harmful and deadly than the AR-15 that I just can't imagine the market for those guns not increasing. So unless you were to go all the way up from the AR-15, again, and I don't know if I would even necessarily support that. I'm just saying on a level of efficacy, I would be worried about, what would then be the next most popular gun, because the really difficult thing about all of this, in my opinion, is that we have gotten really, really good in this society, because it's a sick society. It's a warlike society of creating weapons of war. And at a certain point, when you're trying to focus on technology itself, it's not tremendously complicated to turn a kind of everyday weapon into a very, very powerful, fast firing weapon. Right now, I do think that a lot of these guys, as I said to Matt the other day, the people who are doing these kind of horrific shootings aren't necessarily the types who would be able to, tinker and manufacture on their own these kind of weapons. So yeah, I think that, there's definitely an argument that, something like that might reduce, the severity of these kind of shootings. But I just think that you start to get into a tricky place when you start focusing on the technology that it's just out there. Do you get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I mean, I'm of a couple minds. So like, Trudeau is talking about a mandatory buyback that basically says, like, if you want to keep your assault weapon, it's going to be inoperable in some fashion. I don't know if that's going after ammunition. I think a general like ban of, first of all, like, and this is something that needs to be done on the federal level, because Beto really can't say we're going to ban the at the state level, we're going to ban the production of AR-15s because it's not made in Texas, right? The government just say we're not fucking doing that stuff anymore. And I think
sorry not to cut you off, but there is a lot of gun manufacturing that's moved to Texas in the past 10 years.
Right.
Fair enough. Because a lot of that was built in Connecticut for a long time, and a lot of that has moved here recently. But sorry, I didn't mean to. I'm not sure who produced that exact AR-15 that was used in the shooting, for example.
And Canada's put 1,500 type of guns on the list of that. And like, I'm frankly like, to me personally, like I like you, I'm not completely allergic to gun, but I also, Michael says not expend any political capital on this. I'm also not spending any political capital standing in the way of gun control, especially like the level of gun control that we're talking about here, right? Like I'm somebody who like can entertain a philosophical right to like a rifle or a shotgun for like community generalized defense, and even in a like revolution. Like I don't mind that, but like I don't think you should be allowed to produce fucking these guns. And I think we should. And like you said, like I think it's an important point about how easy some of these other guns are to mod. And we also have, I think, I don't know, maybe it's just a fear-mongering issue, but I think like the 3D gun stuff like is going to create a sort of conversation about this stuff. If you do see a mass killing made with something like that, you're gonna be talking about that too. And if you see an assault weapons ban, like Pelosi's talking about, if you actually see something like that happen, those 3D printers are going to start going off the shelves a little bit. And so I do think you just kind of need to say, if you make something like that, and I prefer that to if you buy something like that, but if you make something like that, or you modify something that produces a certain amount of like ballistic. I don't know how you're going to like quantify it, but ballistic energy per minute, then that's illegal. And I think that's and I think Michael's point. This is why I do feel ambivalent about that, because I think Michael's point about who is going to get policed in the way that this stuff is generally pursued is completely right, and it's completely predictable. And it's like, okay, like we do the thing for 21-year-olds, moving from 18 to 21, so that theoretically you cut down on school shootings, so that at least maybe that one's out of the news. But like I think you told me that the median age for mass killers is like 30, so you're still going to have those ones, but those ones aren't quite as internationally embarrassing as the ones that happen at elementary schools.
No, I mean, when you're talking about this problem, I think it's important to be able to separate a few things, right? Is the focus on stopping these horrors from happening? I think that it should, personally. But you also have to look at like the rate of gun violence and gun deaths in this country. They typically don't happen in that same kind of fashion, right? And so like if you're trying to target policy, right, you have to think about what the intended goal is, right? Something like, again, as I said, I do support background checks. I do support magazine restrictions. I think that those are limited, but I think those are just so common sense and easy to do. I don't think it will solve the problem, but I do think that if it stops one thing, it's worthwhile, right? Because no one's getting hurt on that. I think coming after manufacturers is really the key here, because one of the things when you talk about buybacks or something like this in this country is just to remember how armed people are in this country. I mean, there are just an unbelievable amount of weapons in the United States of America. And, it's just one of those things it'll be very hard to make those things go away. But what is really fueling the new construction and the new influx of weapons? It's profit. And I mean, if you've gone into gun stores, in this country, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's not just weapons, it's military style weapons, and they're being sold to you. I mean, I'll just say in my experience, I've bought an ammo at a gun store before, and somebody was trying to, push me on buying hollow point bullets so that it could go through the thick jackets of those guys you see in the city, which you know exactly what he meant by that. Right. And that is profiting off of hate and death and destruction. That certainly needs to be checked. But two, it's these huge gun manufacturers that know that they're trying to build this kind of, tactical looking weapon to sell to people. And there's a huge market in that. And I think you really need to start addressing that before you start coming to the people. I do think it's tough because I have reservations on this. That if you really want to stop deaths from guns, domestic violence is like by far in a way like the number one indicator. And if you get a charge for domestic violence, you lose your right to a firearm. I feel that makes a lot of sense, though I do worry, and I'm just being honest with y'all. These are things that they're just difficult questions sometimes to work your way through. I have hesitations on that just because I know who gets charged for that and who doesn't. And I just can see, these being a very, very helpful way to, again, police and harass people who are already over policed and harassed. But
I point blank think cops are going to be less likely to hand out domestic violence stuff if it impacts people's guns.
You think so?
I mean, I don't have confidence in how cops handle domestic violence stuff anyway. But I mean, they sit on like all sorts of stuff, and if I don't know, like if all of a sudden, I mean, I don't want to like poo-poo it. Like I said, like I'm just like concerned about that. Like, I mean, sure, let's try it. But yeah, like you said, like I mean, the problem is like the inequities and how it's who is going to. It's going to be poor and not white. That's going to be the skew, and we just know, and you can predict with certainty that that's going to happen. And it's like that's tough to sign on to.
So I think in the immediate future, like passing some very common sense reforms that are just frankly popular across the entire political spectrum. Really, like it's amazing when you look at the polling versus the legislation on this, even in Texas. Limits on magazine clips, background checks, red flag laws, those all work for me. But I also think that the real goal needs to be to start targeting the profit industry behind all of this, because until you deal with that, you won't deal with the money that's in politics that makes these people do this kind of shit. The thing about constitutional carry here in Texas, which I hate to even use their bullshit term, right? Because it's not constitutional, it's not historical or anything like that. It's a complete new fantasy that they put up. Extremely unpopular, even with gun owners, because people don't want random ass people who, beyond even the word about them being a criminal, just having no fucking idea what it is in their pocket, with them walking around with a handgun, right? That's something that just needs to go away. Yeah. We never needed that in this state in our history, and we certainly don't need it right now, right? So there's a lot, I think, that's on the table in Texas in particular that can be done immediately, and where I'll stand, with some people in the Democratic Party saying like, yeah, this makes sense and we should do it. Where I draw the line is I don't want to, I don't support, a huge gun buyback program. I don't support necessarily hard bans on things. I do support coming after the manufacturers and the production of a lot of these weapons, that there's just too many of them. And that's why they're being used, is because there's so many of them and they're so easy to get relatively to other things.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and so my perspective is influenced by not only like, my dad had very close relationship with the Game and Fish department. He's literally like reviewed certain types of arrow technology to see if it's like, fair chase and should be allowed, that sort of thing. So I think like that is a state department that every state's got a Game and Fish or Fish and Game or whatever the fuck you call it. And you should, if you are into firearms, you should have a relationship to that, like most people like have with the DMV.
Totally.
I think that's like that sort of thing is very important. And like there, like you said, there's a sickness in gun culture. There is, I think, like you could see like something in like the old fashioned, outdoorsman type of thing, where you got like the sawed off sort of folded over your forearm and the bird dog next to you. And like, I that's where I come from. And then you have this other sort of like Blackwater
weekend warrior types
that, read all this crazy shit online and buy these weapons and imagine that, they're going to be hunting zombies or something. And to those folks, I think like I don't have a whole lot of sympathy, because I think like what your participation has been in this debate has been to just stonewall and say, we fuck you. Every time there's a like Newtown, anytime there's kids dead, it's fuck you. This is ours. And the Constitution says so. And so guess what? All those folks, you got a lesson in politics if this goes your way. Maybe you can forestall it, but like that's what happens. And that's why like I think our job is to make sure, like, to the best we can, we focus on the wrong people not getting policing. But as far as like, taking away people's right to have a gun that shoots like 25 bullets in 30 seconds, like, sorry, like it'd be nice if these mass killings weren't happening to piss people off and you could just play with your toys and shoot them. But I don't think you should be able to safely go to rifle ranges. I don't think you should be able to I think all that stuff should be regulated and regularly inspected, like a game warden. Like that's on the game warden's job now. It's like checking people's license and going to gun ranges, make sure people don't have military weapons.
And I mean, I think we could go on probably for another hour and a half on this, but I just want to note on that, like, weekend warrior kind of gun psycho culture, like that comes again out of the marketing and the bottom line for the gun manufacturing industry. And those people, well, I don't want to make it seem like I have a lot of sympathy for them. Those people are different necessarily from like the problem of active shooters, but those people play cover and a political role in basically allowing and preventing any kind of very basic reform or regulation on firearms in this country. Right. So yeah, that does need to be addressed. I think if you focus on the source of why there's a market for that kind of thing, you're going to have much, much better results than just sort of poking at individuals, because they are immune to that at this point. As Michael said, we can make fun of them, but until you start going after the industry behind it, you're not going to get very, very far politically.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, I mean, that's that's all I got on that. I think.
Yeah, no, I mean, we could, yeah, again, like we could just go on for a long time because I mean, again, I'll just say like I'm open on a lot of these questions. I'm not particularly open on taking away people's guns writ large. I do believe in gun ownership as a principle, especially for working and poor people, especially when you see the way that police act in this country, both in attacking people and in refusing to defend folks. But again, I'm working through a lot of these things too, because I get worried sometimes that when we finally get the political energy to do something, it's going to be the most punitive and misdirected thing.
Of
and
course.
I think that would be a really horrific disaster that after all of this carnage, after all of this horror, that there's just another disaster waiting to happen.
And I agree. And like, it just reminds me, like, Reconstruction fails, and what does the progressive movement go for? But what is it? The prohibition. It's like, a good alcohol does create problems in society. I mean, and I'm saying like we should regulate guns way worse than we regulate alcohol, but like that sort of thing. Like it's a shame that the state, when we are able to mobilize it, it is in a way that's controlling the people instead of controlling like profit seekers and stuff like that. But.
So maybe we'll do more, and then I'll be curious to hear what people think. And just hearts out to these families. I can't. It's really hard to even think about what they went through, and two fucking big middle fingers to Abbott and Cruz and the rest of that lot who refused to even do the most common sense, basic human thing in these moments.
Yeah.
Well, y'all, we're about to be joined by Alex Press to talk about some emboldening news about how workers at Dollar Generals across the country are finding ways to stand up and fight back against really draconian conditions that they've been working under. We'll come back after that briefly to say goodbye, and then feel free to join us in the post game at patreon.com/leftreckoning. Would love to hear from y'all. You can leave us a voicemail. I'll put that up real quick. You can leave us a voicemail at 1-940-289-7234, and I will answer those. I'll take Discord questions, and we'll see y'all then.
Welcome back, Left Reckoners. I'm Matt Leck. With me, as always, is David Griscom. Hello, David.
How's it going, brother?
It's going well. And joining us today is Alex Press. Alex is a staff writer at Jacobin, covering labor. Alex, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
So you have a new article in Jacobin on the website. Dollar General workers are fed up. Now, I'm trying to remember if Dollar General was, if I've been in a location with Dollar General, but just for folks who don't live in a location with a Dollar General, I mean, most of us have a shared understanding of what dollar stores are, but tell people what Dollar General is as a company, where its footprint is, and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's a dollar store, self-explanatory, right? You can get various things slightly cheaper than at a grocery store. Dollar General has a particularly sort of hierarchical, centralized like stock system. So local stores all carry the same thing. And Dollar General generally cites itself in like particularly low income, underserved communities. I think a recent study was showing that Dollar General, about 30% of their customers make less than $25,000 a year. So these are really the poorest neighborhoods and cities, especially. But there are 18,000 Dollar Generals across the country. So it's a ton of stores. And I think their current employee number is 163,000 workers. So it's a huge company. Dollar General sort of has gotten some headlines recently because there are a lot of armed robberies in the stores, in part because the company really has very few workers in there. So there's just sort of, it's a sort of negligent company in a lot of ways, I would say, is one way to put it, which is what the article was about as well.
Yeah, and just give us, you mentioned the article, just contrast the sort of state of Dollar General as a business, the executive level, how they're doing, versus the workers, and you get into like, you mentioned about the armed robberies, like the conditions for workers are horrible even by American standards.
Mm-hmm. So the average Dollar General employee makes about $18,000 a year. Just above the U.S. poverty threshold, and in a lot of cities, immense poverty to try to get by on 18 grand a year. But the CEO is currently making over $1 million. He got a 37% raise last year, and so he's making about 986 times that of his average worker. Dollar General's done well during the pandemic. It's not like they're sort of in a crisis. If they gave workers, a few $100s of a COVID bonus, but otherwise, Dollar General, it pays badly even for its sector, right? And even compared to like fast food companies. I said $17,000, $18,000 a year. A recent study from the Economic Policy Institute found that 92% of Dollar General employees are making less than $15 an hour. 22% are making less than $10 an hour. So literally as little as you could pay a person legally, Dollar General is employing them at that level.
And then talk about the air conditioning stuff too. Like that part seems very bizarre to me. The sort of obstacle that sort of management is putting up for like a work environment that is suitable to a human being, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's really shocking, right? Like I write about, say, Amazon warehouses all the time. Like I'm not surprised by poor working conditions, but when you start talking Dollar General, they often bring up how hot the stores are. So for that article you're referencing, I talked to this guy, Dithers, who lives in New Orleans. That's where he works at a Dollar General. And the first thing he said when I asked him, I wanted to ask him, how much are you making? What are your complaints about the job? And he just went into this very detailed explanation about how he stays hydrated in his store. He was saying, I have 2 Powerades and a huge bottle of water, and, the heat is crazy. And I talk to management and they say, either the AC's on and I need to toughen up, or they don't care at all. And in the few days since I wrote that article, actually, all of the workers at a Dollar General in Oklahoma quit en masse over what they say was the temperature was over 90 degrees in the store every day. It doesn't make any sense unless you think of Dollar General as just fully having, treating their workers almost in an ungodly way, as completely non-human. It's no interest in investing money to keep a store, a livable working condition. And OSHA has cited Dollar General time and again, I think over 50 times in the past 5 years for hazardous working conditions. Obviously, OSHA's fines amount to almost nothing for a company like Dollar General. And so they're just continuing to ignore every problem in the store, which is what's leading workers to start speaking up to people like me, as well as, they held a big rally last week outside of the shareholders meeting in Tennessee, demanding some changes both to wages and working conditions.
And I mean, that's such a great action. Like it reminds me of, the miners in Alabama who've been showing up to New York to protest outside of BlackRock, like, I don't know, bringing the fight directly to Capitol. But it's not like Dollar General's been really struggling over the past few years, right?
No, not at all.
Put those kind of improvements in place.
No, I mean, this is pure callousness, right? I mean, I think often a lot of us on the left, rightfully we're thinking about, well, this company is prioritizing profits and they're going to do the minimum amount that they can as far as laying out money for labor costs. But at a certain degree, you have to start thinking about callousness, right? Like if this company is treating these workers and it's driving them to the breaking point, it almost goes beyond the economic rationale, right? This is now just undermining the company if people start speaking out about it. But they just truly, in organizing campaigns at Dollar General, just the organizers on the ground say the callousness and cruelty is just unbelievable at this company.
And
go ahead, David.
Like, I just want to add, callousness to the workers and to the customers too. I mean, there's there's an understanding. I mean, if you're going into a store and it's like the only store in your area that you have to go to, and it's 95 degrees in there, that's pretty rough too. And it's like, I don't know, it's just like a perspective from Dollar General that, they have captured employees in a captured market and they can basically do whatever they want.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's no sense that this is not a company that cares about the communities it's in either. It is there because it cites its stores into the lowest income parts of the country, and knows that those customers are trapped and will have to buy whatever they're selling.
And like it extracts capital out of those communities too, right? Because if it's a big corporation, like the profits are going to shareholders elsewhere, and then the people who are living in the community are getting paid $9 an hour.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, it's really like all the things that dollar stores. It really like captures what what they're symptomatic of in the ills of the system. Like we talk about like certain places have food deserts and they don't have a nice grocery store. Like what that is also saying is there's probably a job desert there as well, and that. Places like Dollar General know that those workers are people that, because I worked at McDonald's. When you say the AC thing, I worked at McDonald's in high school. We lost the AC for one really hot day, and we didn't work that. Like work was called off at my location. So like there's a certain level, you can force these people into this environment, and like that they would be saying, yeah, the AC is on. You just need to toughen up. Like that is, like you said, like that's just. Disrespect and callousness, like you say.
Yeah, I mean, and it's amazing. Even the managers of these Dollar Generals are, they work. I feel like there was some study, I can't remember the exact date, but the managers at these Dollar Generals were working like 70 hours a week. They are just, completely under immense pressure to keep the staffing low, keep the labor, pick up all the work themselves. And there's this woman, Mary Gundel, who recently got fired from Dollar General. She was a manager at a Dollar General, and she finally just started making talks that then went viral about how understaffed the store was. They also had a broken AC, and this got a lot of attention, and Dollar General's response was to fire her, and she was a manager. So these are, it's a brutal bottom line at this company, and just a complete, again, callousness and disrespect for everyone involved in making this company a massive profitable corporation.
Wow, yeah, I was just Googling that Dollar General TikTok. Maybe we'll play that on the show tonight. That is, I mean, because that is like the thing that I love to see from certain like social media platforms is occasionally like it's all algorithmically, designed to like cater to celebrity interest or whatever like that. But occasionally some genuine stuff will get through where it's people saying like "fuck our boss," but okay, so let's talk about the where we go from here element of this. What's the state of union organizing with Dollar General? Could it, join up with what we're seeing at Starbucks and Amazon, for instance?
Yeah, so I mentioned that there was this rally outside of the shareholders meeting in Tennessee last week. And that was organized. There were something like 150 Dollar General workers, including the guy I talked to, David Williams, was there. Mary Gundel, the woman from the TikToks, was there. And there were other workers there in support, right? Amazon workers, fast food workers, Starbucks employees joined, as well as people like Reverend William Barber, who's, labor leader in the South. And this was coordinated with organizations like United for Respect, Fight for 15. So there is some level of momentum forming around the idea of a nationwide kind of pushback against Dollar General's working conditions. As people who listen to your show probably know, this is a moment where workers have a little more leverage, right? And that's what's been sort of influencing these organizing campaigns at the likes of Amazon and Starbucks. And so I do think Dollar General employees hope to similarly leverage their strength right now to push for, at least some improvements. As for union campaigns, there have been a couple efforts in recent years, and it's hard in a way that Starbucks is hard in that they employ very few people per store, actually far fewer than Starbucks. A Starbucks usually has like 25 employees. A Dollar General can have like 7 or 8 employees total. And so one of those small stores did vote to unionize in 2020, and the company just shut it down. They shuttered the store. That was in Missouri. In 2021, there was another effort to unionize a Dollar General in Connecticut, I believe with the UFCW. And the company retained a very prominent union-busting law firm called the Labor Relations Institute, paying those consultants almost $3,000 a day to stop the workers from supporting the union. And indeed, they won. So that did go to an NLRB vote, and Dollar General defeated the union campaign. I am not aware of any new ones that have been launched, in the past few months. But when you see this level of complaint and intolerable conditions, and certainly when you think about the fact that heating is such a problem and we're about to enter summer, I would not be surprised if, there are efforts. That I mentioned that store in Oklahoma, people quit en masse. That is not so different than people leaning the other way and saying, let's fight and try to organize a union. So I wouldn't be surprised if that comes down the pipeline soon.
And it's interesting, just to circle back to what you said about all these Dollar Generals are short-staffed. Like that feels like something that's a reason to get into a union if you are feeling that pinch. Because I hear from a lot of people who work in retail that it's constantly you're covering like 3 different people's positions, and I mean that's like this is a moment of supposedly opportunity, like we say for workers, but also the screws are being put to them as well, and it's frustrating to see.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add in, sort of closing here that one thing during the pandemic that really was hard to miss if you're talking to workers all the time and writing about, strikes and organizing campaigns is that it wasn't just wages that were motivating people. It really was overwork. So some of the biggest strikes we saw, say at John Deere or especially in the food manufacturing industry, so Kellogg's and Nabisco, this was about workers who were working, 7 days a week and 12, 14-hour shifts per day. Employers are responding to a disinterest in, hiring new employees by just overworking the ones they have. And the sort of irony here is that experience pushes the workers together, right? Now you're spending all of your time with your coworkers and you're suffering together. And, I've spoken to a lot of Starbucks workers who similarly said that was part of the basis for their union, was that they just spent the past 2 years together in a way that was way beyond what they used to spend. And so they grew closer and they started to trust each other and realized that they were the ones keeping the store afloat. So I do think that level of overwork can actually have these unintended consequences. And to be clear, Dollar General's entire model is about understaffing. They sort of are above and beyond. It's not just a pandemic thing. They always keep it a skeleton crew in their stores.
Right. Now, Alex, you have three other articles in the brand newly designed Jacobin magazine on this similar topic. Would you want to preview those for us? And I guess if you want, just give us your general thoughts about this overall movement we're seeing. Like we had you on Majority Report recently, and you did kind of pour a little bit of cold water on the triumphalism we're seeing, which I think was a little bit welcome. But I'm just curious, preview those articles, and I'm curious what you're seeing over the last month or so.
Yeah, I think I just have one article in that new issue of Jacobin, which is on labor union in Staten Island. And that is something, I've been writing about Amazon's working conditions for years. And it is a remarkably unexpected development that I am now writing about successful union campaigns there. And so, that article is about sort of tracing that campaign from its start to the present, which now the present is that they have lost one campaign at a smaller facility that's just across the street from that original warehouse. So they lost at LDJ 5 is what the place is called, and they won at JFK 8. And that's really, I think, one thing that people should watch is the sort of going forward. There's a lot of momentum and a lot of connections being made among Amazon workers now that aren't in unionized facilities and those that either have won a union or are working on it. I think that story is super important. I was talking to Chris Smalls, the head of the ALU, from just as soon as he got fired 2 years ago. And there was a sense that this is a guy who's really taking it very personally and is going to devote himself to organizing his coworkers. And so I think there are a lot of Chris Smalls at other Amazon warehouses who feel like, they're being denied their dignity and it's completely unacceptable. And so I would expect new efforts like that to emerge. I mean, as you said, I tend to pour cold water on things because I just know how bad it is for so many people. And how many obstacles there are to a successful union campaign in the United States. But it is absolutely the case that there is energy, unlike anything I've seen in many years. People at companies where the odds are just immensely stacked against them still being willing to fight. Amazon, Starbucks being some of those companies, and maybe Dollar General would be another. And so I do think that we may see things pop up that previously, even just a year or two ago, seemed unthinkable. What are we going to see happen at Walmart? What are we going to see happen at companies like that? And it's funny, I'm talking to you guys as I'm helping coordinate get folks to the Labor Notes conference in Chicago in 2 weeks, which it just as a sort of symptomatic a measure to take the temperature. Usually Labor Notes has like 2,000 people attend. This year, I think they had to cap it at 6,000. They just immediately, everyone wanted to be there. No one wants to miss a chance to talk to workers in other industries that are unionizing or going on strike. And I do think that is, a rare sort of objective data point we can look at and say that there's so much energy right now. People want to change things. And certainly I hope that they can succeed in that.
I mean, I don't know about you, David, but I remember that when we had Chris Smalls on TMBS, and like that was very much, look at this underdog, let's support this. And to like fast forward now to be like, oh, actually, this guy's the model of how you can do something like this, who has forced not even like the squad to listen, but like Joe Biden. Yeah, I think I agree with you. Like that bit is extremely encouraging, and like that we can actually have workers themselves directing this stuff is really excellent, and it's not a surprise to me. Like I saw him on Dithers and Miro like a week and a half ago, and it's like this is the Dithers and Miro interview that I won't just skip right over. Anyway, Alex Press, thank you so much for joining us today. What's your Twitter handle?
It's Alex N Press.
Alex N Press. You can find her work at Jacobin. Thank you so much, Alex. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Alex is great.
Yeah, that was great. She does really great coverage there. And I also just want to say, no disrespect to the Dithers and Miro guests. It's just that those guys are not good at interviewing people.
Matt's trying to line himself up a guest spot there.
I mean, I really wish like we thought about trying to get Miro on TMBS. That would have been awesome. But yeah, folks, we're going to talk about. Well, I know we're going to talk about Joe Rogan in the post game. This new clip, which is similar to the old clip about the UBI, but there's a new little gloss there. So we're going to talk about Joe. Patreon.com/Left Reckoning. We'll be starting that in about 15 minutes or so.
Yeah, and again, always feel free to leave us a message at 1940-289-7234. And one more plug, patreon.com/Left Reckoning. Really appreciate everybody and appreciate this community so much. We got some fun stuff coming up in May, and I can't wait to share it all with y'all. But until next week, we'll see you on the post game.
Peace out. Oops. Oh, sorry. All right, folks, you get me for a little split second more.